Welcome, game dev adventurers, to the Indie Game Lunch Hour. Today we're talking with William Schmitt about finding the fun.
The Indie Game Lunch Hour.
Always puts a smile on my face. Welcome, everybody, to the Indie Game Lunch Hour. In our live magical podcast, we give game developers the chance to hear stories of breaking in from industry experts, as well as directly ask them questions about their areas of expertise in the second half of each episode. I'm seeing lots of dancing emojis in the chat. I love it. As always, this is a weekly event that we host in our Discord, live Wednesdays at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, so feel free to swing by and join us for the next one. And as always, I'm your host, Willem Dalbenthal, the headmaster here at the Indie Game Academy and the self-proclaimed Gandalf of Games. And joining me today is William Schmitt. William is the head of studio at Proof of Play, who are the creators of Pirate Nation. They're actually working on a brand new game with the creators of Farmville. And today I'm talking with William about finding the fun in the video game industry. That's what we're all here for, after all. William, welcome to the show. I'm really excited to chat with you about this one. What are you having for lunch today?
I'm having the classic peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I do mine toasted with Fritos and a cherry Coke.
Wow. That's like once you toast a PB&J, like PB&J, staple. It's like the Lembas bread of today's day and age, I think. But once you toast it, it gets just that little bit more fancy.
I do one level up as well, in that I have 3 pieces of bread, so it's like a Big Mac, where you go peanut butter on 2 slices, and then you put the jelly in the middle, put it on one, put the jelly in the other. Oh, it's perfect.
Amazing. I've done the same before. At least I don't know about the peanut butter versus jelly distribution. What you're describing there is a little mind-boggling to me. But at least the 3 pieces of bread, I've definitely done that before when I'm a little hungrier.
Yeah. Well, we test a lot. The 2 pieces of bread just didn't give me the right distribution of ingredients. I needed more jelly, less bread. So.
I understand. So it's just an iterative process. Maybe that's a part
it was years of research, Yeah. And I landed on the boysenberry jelly. That's my favorite.
Amazing. Well, welcome to the show, William. It's really great to have you on. There's already people who are excited to be hearing from you as somebody working on Proof of Play. It's wonderful to have you on the show. As always, though, we have to start with the origin story. So, William, tell us about where you are today and how you got there.
I'm at Proof of Play. I'm the head of studio. We are kind of tip of the spear for making games that are fully on chain. We do not have servers or anything. Everything is built and exists on the chain itself. So I got here the long way. I started about 32 years ago. Actually, even before that, I was making software in 1987. I was making tax software. And then I realized I was making tax software. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. So our company got sold to Intuit. I went to San Diego for a little while, trained them up, and then went skiing for 6 months and said, it's time to find a new career. Found my way into video games with a small company called Nova Logic. We made a voxel space game called Comanche Maximum Overkill. And I was just customer support. I was taking phone calls and telling people how to use their high mem sys on their PC and how to set up their game to run, basically. I made a mission disk there. Just found the tools, talked to the programmer, said, hey, can I try this? And they said, sure. And I just started laying out missions where you fly around, you blow up these tanks, and you find a headquarters and pick up a hostage and bring them back and that type of stuff. And while I was on the phone, I was just making these things while I was talking to the customers. And engineers got a hold of it and started playing some of them and said, hey, we like these. Can we use them? I'm like, that'd be amazing. Like my work actually getting out in front of people, that'd be insane. So they took like 30 of my missions and they made a mission pack and they sold it. And it was an amazing experience until they said, okay, cool, thanks, you're fired. And I'm like, what? Wait, I want to be a game designer. This is really cool. And they're like, yeah, we don't need you anymore.
Wow. A true
introduction
to the game industry.
Yeah, exactly. So, but the publisher of the game, Electronic Arts, said, hey, are you interested in coming up for an internship? We heard you play Dungeons and Dragons. They're making a game called Shadowcaster with a group called id and another group called Raven. So it was the 3 of them together. And they were not happy with the way the game was turning out. It was not fun. It was very dry. It did not perform well. So they brought me up, and I brought up a big black folder with my world in it, and sat there for 2 hours and kind of walked them through my pantheon, my lands, like the kingdoms, the politics, like all this type of stuff. Walked them through several of the adventures that the players in my campaigns have been through, and they said, "Cool, can you start today?" And I said, "I can." And then they showed me my desk, and I started making levels for Shadowcaster. And you could not drag me out of that building. I was so happy working 12, 16 hours a day, just building stuff that was going to get in front of people, right? And I didn't have a lot of tools to play with, but again, I was new to the programmers. So I went over and I chatted with them, and they told me how things worked. And I found out I did what I thought was a clever thing. Like at one point, you went into a graveyard and you were walking through the graveyard, and I made all the animation play backwards, so the skeletons kind of assembled up out of the graves, and then they attacked you, and people just freaked out, and they thought it was the best thing ever. I'm like, really? Awesome. So I got to go through and make a bunch of the game. They used like all of my content that I made for the game. It was great. And then they, that instantly turned into a job at Electronic Arts, which I was there for about 5 years. Worked on a lot of different franchises, launched their boxing and racing franchises with them. Just so many good people, such great experience. And then, danced around a bunch of different companies, including creating my own 3D6 games. Ran that for 3 years, made 9 products on the Game Boy Advance. Worked at a place called Digital Eclipse, Genuine Games, Activision, THQ, Disney. More recently, I worked at Scopely on WWE Champions. Disney, I worked on the Avengers Alliance franchise. Nifty Games, worked on NFL Clash and NBA Clash. And then 2 years ago, landed here at Proof of Play. And this has been a very interesting experience. It's creating games in a new frontier, the on-chain frontier, which has its own challenges, but it has the same goal as all the other companies, which is make a really fun product that people want to play.
Wow, what a cool origin story. There's so many parts of this that I want to call out. The first thing, though, that I want to say is the fact that it's palpable, it's noticeable. I'm looking at your face, even if you're a listener right now, you're listening to the podcast and you aren't seeing William's face. It's palpable that you are still excited by like the world that you created and pitching that to this team and sitting down and just working on cool games from a project that you worked on years ago. And that's really cool, and it's something for, I think, everyone to take away from this. It's easy as we become sort of more commercialized and as we become a little bit more defined in today's day and age in the gaming industry, it's easy to start thinking about us as a profession that you have to sort of study, but never forget, and I think it's a perfect call out for the topic of today's episode, never forget that what we're doing is just having fun. What we're doing is making fun and interesting games, and that's number one.
I ran a D&D game last night, right? And it's just... games are fun. That's what they're supposed to be. If it ever... I don't like games that are like egg timer games, where I literally just go in, I do some actions every day, and then I log out and wait for my time so I can come back and do them again. I want things that challenge me intellectually. I want things that make my choice matter, right? And I want to have impact on the world, and I want to be able to leave my mark on those worlds, right? That's just some basic tenets to what makes a game fun. Make sure the player feels like their choices matter.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the core promise of this art form is autonomy, is player choice. I love that. I think there's also something to be said here for, we had William Schmitt on the podcast a couple episodes ago, who is the guy who wrote Hey, You're Finally Awake in Skyrim, which was a very huge fanboy moment for me when I realized that he was that guy. But he actually talks about how he managed to get his way into a leadership position at his first company. And a big part of what he talked about is basically doing work on the side. But I think mirroring what you just told us, that doesn't mean like working your butt off and destroying your work-life balance. Instead, what I think that means, and what clearly happened in your own story, is you were continuing to have fun and explore and create. You made these mission packs for your very first game, even though you were in CS. when it wasn't necessarily going to be used, when you were just exploring and learning and growing, and it just so happened that they picked it up, and then that was your sort of springboard for your first game design experience. Would you agree with that?
I would, yeah. Like you have to love what you do. I mean, I often say I'm not working at a bank, right? It's like that's like my nightmare scenario where I'm
Or on
just like,
tax software?
yeah, or on tax software is the worst, which is why I did it for 4 years. No, but sometimes you got to pay the bills, and that's the games were an escape for me at that time. When I was working on tax software, I would look very very much forward to going home and playing Dungeons and Dragons or Marvel superheroes, or going to the arcade and playing, you know, whatever it was at the time, right? I'm a huge fan of a lot of the old arcade games. I actually get to port a lot of the old arcade games to different platforms, the PSX and the Game Boy. So like Spy Hunter and Joust and Defender and like all those games. Got into Street Fighter heavy. I was a big Street Fighter nut. I did competitions, which is probably why I suffered one of the worst stints of well, it was both fantastic and horrible in my work career. I got to work on a game called Shaq Fu back in the 90s.
I am well aware of this game.
Yes, so they found I was at Electronic Arts, and they came to me and they said,
Now I'm fanboying, by the way.
you need to go to Paris. And I'm like, you're right. And so they sent me to Paris. There was a studio called Delphine Studios, which legendary creators. And I got to sit with them, which was horrible because they all smoked at their desks, and that's not cool. But I was in Paris for like a month, and I got to sit down with them and talk to them about how to make a fighting game, and what frame advantage means, and how to interrupt the animation in the middle logically and have it branch to something else like a hit reaction, which they just didn't understand when I got there. And my first trip there, I spent time with them, and we went through all the basics, and we listed out all the stuff they'd have to change. And I'm like, wow, this is like 6 months of work, like for us to get this all in. So I came back and I sat down with Larry and Bing, and I said, guys, we're in bad shape. Like, here's the whole thing. It's going to take us like 6 months to fix it. And they're like, cool, we're shipping for Christmas. You have 2 months. Go back and get it done. And so I went back, and we made it bug free and got some of we basically prioritized our backlog, and said, okay, this is the stuff that has to get in. We didn't get it all in, which is why it is like one of the 10 worst games of all time. You guys will look it up at some point and laugh, but it's really not a great game. But I learned so much from it. I learned so much from it.
Wow. That's really cool. I love that. I love it. It seems to be a consistent theme, I think, especially those who started this industry earlier than later, where it's about having fun. It's enjoying yourself, and you happen to work in this industry and find work in this industry, and that's all well and good. But ultimately, what it comes down to is just like, I was having a good time making Shaq punch people. And that's as far as it really went. Now, before we continue, I want to get to the topic of today. That's a really cool story, and I think people can absolutely take some stuff away from that. But I do want to address one thing. You mentioned that at Proof of Play right now, you are the only people making games entirely on-chain. Can you give us a quick explanation of what that means?
Well, I wouldn't say we're the only people, but there are only a few studios that are doing it, and we are one of the very, very few. Making a game without a server and still making it authoritative, that not non-client authoritative, right? So it's hard to hack. It's not an easy thing to do. We want to make something that is that has player ownership. So like imagine you're playing EverQuest, but you own all your stuff and you can take it with you, and like interoperability where you can actually bring it from game to game. And maybe it's not a direct correlation like my longsword in this game is a longsword in that game, but it gives me a bonus in there. Right. And then it's immutable, right? You can't turn it off. Amit, the founder of the company, used to work at, he actually created Farmville, right? He was one of the core engineers of Farmville. And he and I have similar stories. Like I was on Avengers Alliance. And these are games that were not ready to be shut down, but the publishers decided it was time. And yet there were still a lot of players playing those games. So when they got shut down, what choice do you have? You didn't own the asset, so all your investment's gone, right? Mm-hmm. It was on their servers. They turned off their servers. It's gone, right? We want to make games that are immutable. Like they're gonna, as long as players want to play them, they're gonna be able to play them. and they're going to own their assets. And if they want to, move them to other players, they can move them to other players. We're going to make it interoperable, right? We're going to create more games, and those assets are going to have promise in those games moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so on-chain means on blockchain, if anybody is unfamiliar with that. And yes, so there's a couple of things that we're all excited about for blockchain, and a few of those are the interoperability, the immutableness, the fact that I can earn something in a game and it can't be taken away from me. And I could potentially, this is sort of one of the things that still remains in the air, we haven't quite solved. I could potentially move objects from one game to the other since they have that blockchain record and it's impossible to delete them or lose them. Now, despite the fact that blockchain is very cool, and we could talk about that all episode, we decided that the topic of today is the power of fun and discovering fun in a game. So give us the sort of 101 on that. We are your students right now, William. What is the 101 on creating fun in our games?
All right. So finding the fun is it's the hardest part of the operation, but it's the part of the operation that you can do ahead of hiring a team, ahead of doing, like, you could do this on your own, right? I tend to do it with a small group because I like to vet the stuff that I do. But let me actually show anybody who's like looking on Kim. I'm going to show you this little set of cards that I created. These are just little printouts that little pieces of paper that I cut out for a game called Marvel Tactics that we were building back in the day, and it was a little card game that very much resembles what Marvel Snap is today, and we played that. These little cards. We'd go to lunch. We had a little lunchroom, so we get our lunch and we sit down. And I would just break out these cards and explain the rules. And if it takes a long time to explain the rules, right there already you have a problem, right? So people should be able to pick this up naturally if you wanted to get to a wide audience. Now, I should preface that by saying, if you're on mobile, you have about 10 seconds to catch the attention of your player. If it's on a console, you have a little more time. Probably about 2 minutes or so to show the game in a way that makes people say, "Ooh, that's something I want to participate with." We tend to focus more on the mobile side, which means you need to pick it up quick. So make the game obvious, right? It's really obvious when you have space invaders coming down and shooting at you, and you shoot back at them. You get the game right there, like you understand what it is. So how do you frame your game in a way that people just get it, right? In my case, when I set the board up, there were like 3 lands that you had to protect, right? And then you had superheroes and supervillains that basically tried to take those lands and hold them. It was a capture the flag, hold the base type of game. So being able to project that quickly and just see the players get it. Minimal explanation. Try to see if people can get it with you just saying like 50 words or less, right? Because again, people got to pick it up quick or they're going to move on, especially in today's mentality for gamers that grew up on mobile games.
Amazing. Yeah, it's kind of funny that you talk about basically making this understandable. You should be able to explain it in 50 words or less. One of my favorite game design lessons that I ever went through as a designer, and I still talk about obviously to this day, is when I worked on children's games for 2 to 6-year-olds. And so we were not able to write any text and explain how the game works because we just can't guarantee that these kids know how to read yet. It was one of the most fascinating and valuable tutorialization experiences that I've ever picked up. All right, so the 2 lessons that I got for that, or the 2 like easy takeaways at least for the audience, are number 1, it needs to be easy to play and understand. Number 2, it needs to have obvious mechanics. You also alluded to right there paper prototyping, which is one of my favorite topics. We could totally spend a bunch of time there. And yeah, the ability to discover the power of play, the fun, before ever even hiring on a team. That is one of the secrets, I think. We're most interested here in helping juniors and indies. That's really the audience listening to this right now. And that is one of the things that a lot of people sort of do, but don't do intentionally, maybe, where they just start working on a game because it sounds fun rather than proving the fun. So how does one prove the fun? How do you know a game is fun before you start building it?
So One, are your previous players asking to play it again? That's always a good sign. When people play it, they're going to have feedback for you, right? If they have no feedback, that's a bad sign. If they have negative feedback, that's a good sign. Actually, that lets you find the weaknesses and iterate to success. One of the things that I heard it framed at Disney as fail fast, and I really like that idea, which is, look, don't spend a bunch of time on something, building a product for like a year and a half, and then put it out in the market and find out it's not a good product. Find out in like days, weeks, like find out as quickly as you can. Prototype with a goal in mind. Like, I want players' reactions to be this, right? Let's see if I can prompt this reaction by putting this in front of people. And if you don't get it, ask yourself why it didn't happen, right? Like, observe. Don't over explain. As people are playing, when they start asking questions, be that jerk that turns the question back on them. But what do you think should have happened? Like, what did you expect to happen, right? If you lead them, you're going to get corrupted data, and you're not going to get the kind of feedback you want out of it.
I love that as a principle because I love telling my students to shut up during playtest because it's so tempting.
It's so tempting to just jump up and go, push that, because you want to see them succeed. But that is one of the keys to success. If they actually push the button that you're pushing them to do, you're like, oh, come on, please push that. Then you know it's intuitive. Then you know that it makes sense. If you have to tell somebody, it's a bad sign.
Yeah, and that's a big one. There's an ego tied with playtesting, especially if, in my opinion, when you're playtesting, you should always be in the room, or at least watching in a live capacity with the ability to talk to the player after the fact. And so it's really tempting, because it's live, especially, to have your ego all tied up and mixed up in that. So when the player hates it or is super confused, you're like, oh no, like, okay, but I can fix this if I just tell them how to get, through this puzzle or whatever. But the thing is, an actual player, one of the people who might buy your game, won't have you there to help them through it. So
yeah, there's no excuse, there's no help. Like, if anything, when people start asking questions, you're like, okay, one of the things you're going to do when you're getting ready to launch a product is you're going to build something called a FATUI, the first time user experience. And you want to hear all those questions so that you can answer them. First of all, try to answer them all through gameplay itself, like make it more intuitive, stuff like that. But second of all, repeat that in your first time user experience, right? Make sure that you cover that in the experience so that people understand why they're doing things.
Yeah, it's actually useful to notice those times where you would talk to them, because that's something for you to include in that first time user experience, that FATUI. But telling them anything is like losing information, and is also corrupting data, as you say. I love the fact, by the way, I love the quote that you gave us earlier. Bad feedback is actually good, because it shows that they are willing to give the feedback. It shows that they care enough about your game to think deeply about it and be like, okay, well, maybe this is how it could be improved. No feedback is when it's bad. No feedback is when they're so disinterested, they're like, yeah, it's good. That's the worst case. That's how maybe you don't have a winner. And another great takeaway that you sort of alluded to is kill your babies. It's okay.
No sacred cows. No sacred cows. When you're building something new, holding something as a sacred cow is actually a danger, because it leads to bad decisions, right? It leads to you committing to something that hasn't proven itself.
Yeah, 100%. It's so easy to fall in love with the concept before it's proven, but I urge you to be merciless. Don't fall in love with your baby until it's at least toddler aged and is super cute and adorable. That's messed up. I don't know. All right. My last question for you, or sort of last realm of topic before we move on to the community questions, there's a lot of good ones waiting in the chat there, is the sort of like core components of fun. So we've done a little bit of play testing. We've gotten some feedback, both bad and good. And we know that this game is starting to be interesting. What are some of the core fundamentals of fun? Like, what are some of the principles or mechanics or your go-to tried and true systems maybe that help make your games fun?
I like to make sure that my players are still curious, right? And that they feel like they're still discovering. The games I really enjoy, obviously Dungeons and Dragons and all the role-playing games, stuff like that. I want people exploring. I want people asking questions. If they're not asking the questions and they're just repeating tasks, that can easily become a grind, and grinds become that egg timer experience that I don't like. So I find that making sure players are making choices that matter, making sure that when they succeed, they're being rewarded not just with in-game rewards, but this kind of satisfaction that they were smart enough to figure out a puzzle, right? And we acknowledge that they figured out that puzzle. And when this is actually something I learned early in a lot of playtesting was if it's close, people are interested. If it's a blowout, they're not so interested. And we learned that with Madden football all the way back in the 90s when I was working on Madden. And close games, and it's funny because Madden always resulted in these 96-2 games, and people were like, "Oh, I blew them out, woo!" But what we found was more people were engaged when it was 26-24 was the score, or something along those lines, right? Where it's like there's pressure at the end, and you know that something's going to matter, and you literally get invested in the experience at that point. If it's a blowout, you're just like, okay, I'm just coasting, right? If it's a blowout and you're the one getting blown out, it's frustrating, right? So you want to make sure your game sits in the middle of that band of fun, right? Of that tension. If you lose the tension and it's a blowout in one direction or the other, people stop playing. We saw this again with NFL Clash when we tuned it wrong and people were getting blowouts. They didn't come back. Like we saw the retention drop. When we tuned it too hard, people got frustrated. We got fire blasted in our community channels for it, and deservedly so. And then they a lot of them churned at that point. So finding that tension point where people where their decision matters to the success or not, and it's moment to moment. That's like a magical point if you can reach that.
Those are some excellent principles. It's kind of interesting when you're making a game. It's there's a difference between the fun of a moment and the kind of fun that is sticky, that keeps a player playing. So that example in Madden, I think, is a perfect example. It's really satisfying the first time you have a blowout. It's like, oh man, I wrecked that dude. If you're playing Smash Bros. And you've got 4-stock and you 4-stock them, you're like, yup, I'm freaking epic. But if that's how it goes every single time, it loses meaning. And the minute your game loses meaning, there's no reason to play anymore. If it's always a blowout,
you need that challenge. You need to continue to put a puzzle in front of them that they can win if they make the right choices, and they feel like they can win if they make the right choices. But there's still that risk of loss, and without that risk, the game's just not fun.
Yeah, I completely agree on that one. So a few of the principles that I took away from that for making your games fun, everyone. Number one is to build the curiosity in your player. If your player is not asking questions and exploring, then you've probably already lost them. So building a game that continues to have depth, that continues to be interesting, continues to have questions that need answering, is good. Number two is game balance, making sure that your game stays close, that you don't have the metaphorical blowout. Your game might have different rules that don't allow for a blowout. It might not be multiplayer, but one way or another, think about your engagement curve, and if basically they wind up peaking too early or staying at peak means nothing. And number three, decisions need to matter. Think about creating tension in your game. It needs to matter if I do A versus B. If it winds up being the same results every time, then the player is going to lose interest pretty quickly. Awesome. All right, let's get to our community questions. We've got a lot of really good ones. I'm calling Rick up to the stage for community question number one. Rick, would you like to begin?
Yeah, it's really cool hearing how you took the journey from being a software developer who was a DM and then kind of combined your tech and creativity. So I'm curious, what were your first steps like in channeling your DM energy into world building for a production project? Like, what pieces did you design first? What got implemented first? What did that look like when you were first stepping into that?
I wanted to know what kind of puzzles I could set up, right? So I was working in software back in the day where we were still building stuff in like Notepad, right? And WordPad. And it was like, we didn't have a lot of the structured tools that we have today, like Unity and stuff. But finding out what type of levers I had was really important. So I had a conversation with the engineers. They explained how things, like how the systems all worked. And then I went back to my desk and I just started poking at stuff. And then what I did is I set a goal for myself. Like, I want the skeletons coming up in the graveyard was a great example. Like, I said, okay, if I'm walking through this level, what's gonna interest me, right? What's gonna challenge me? What do I think a good goal would be? And I thought, okay, I want to surprise the player. Okay, what can I do to surprise the player? Let's animate the skeletons up from the ground around them and have them start coming at them. Okay, let's see if I can do that. And I dug into the code a little bit. I figured out how the animation system worked. I just literally, you play the frames of animation and it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And I just literally put the numbers in backwards. And then I saw the thing pop up out of the ground. I'm like, oh, this is great. So it's my own curiosity that basically spurred that moment. And so I played with the tools and I got that to happen. And I was like, okay, how can I challenge myself now? And back then, games were a little simpler. So it was like, it was an order in which you had to take out the skeletons that would make the battle easy, right? And so take out the one that pops up first, right? So if you see them pop up, and there's like 6 of them that pop up, take out them in the reverse order. The order they popped up in, and you're gonna have the easiest time of it. And then I just played with it until it worked. And then I took it in front of people and I said, hey, walk through the graveyard. What do you think? And as they walked through the graveyard, I saw them jump out of their skin, right? When the things popped up, I'm like, yes. And then I saw them do the fight and they lost. And I was like, okay, do it again. And by the 3rd time, they won. And I'm like, well, what'd you think? And they loved it. And I was like, cool, all right. And that's where it started forming. I didn't know this yet, right? It started forming in my brain that, can I surprise people? In this case, it's like kind of a jump scare. And can they kind of figure the puzzle out? And I'd happened upon that tension line that worked, right? So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, like that definitely is very gameplay oriented. So like you came in and it sounds like you were being a tech designer saying like, okay, this is how I'm going to craft the experience as if I was a DM and this is the player going through it. I was also curious about like, you had talking about your pantheon and all the different elements of world building. Is that something that was a part of your journey, or did you kind of jump in as a gameplay designer where you developed the experience from a very technical perspective?
The way I'd say I did it from a technical experience based on the game was already, they already had the idea for the game and the setting and things like that. So I didn't have the opportunity to contribute to that so much as play with what they had in front of me.
All right, cool. Thank you.
Amazing. You then, William, I can definitively from here on out say that you started the trope of reanimating skeletons. Right?
As early as 1993. That was when I did it. I don't know if it was probably done before then.
That's probably the first one. All right, Soulcatcher, Basil Knight, hello, welcome to the stage. I hear you have a question.
Yes, hello, Williams.
Hello.
Can you hear me? Excellent.
Yes.
So William, you seem to have a very similar background to what I have. Started in tech development and am a bit of a DM. My question is, your story was you showed something, but you ended up having a conversation with people, and you can geek out, and then they can say, "Yeah, you're awesome. You're exactly what we want. You're going to come work for us, right?" Aside from serendipity, what advice would you have for demonstrating that you can do that stuff in a more formal basis or on your portfolio or whatnot? I would love to be able to get into game design. I'm just transitioning now, but I would love to get into a position that, similar to you, or I'm leading the narrative without having to put in 10 to 20 years of dues to be able to, climb up to get to that point. I want to start with that and just impress people, hopefully, with, my ideas, my game ideas.
I have a webpage that I put together, which is my Dungeons and Dragons world. And I can direct people to it and just let them poke around at it, right? And see, it's got it starts off like a history of the world, and then you can click on the maps, and I use Campaign Cartographer to build out all the world pieces, and if you click in, it zooms in on them, and then it shows a side panel which has all of the history and the leadership and all that type of stuff. So it's a book really that I point people to, and I say, if you want to see what my creativity is like, come take a look at my site. Right, it gives them an example of how I lay stuff out, and the kind of materials and my voice and everything is in there, right? So it represents me when I can't be in the room.
Okay, that's a good idea. I have written started writing a fantasy saga, and I do have something up. William, would mind if I post that to chat and get some feedback?
Yeah, absolutely, Basil.
Sure.
And we can maybe include it in links later as well.
Perfect. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Basil. Does that answer your question? Give you some thoughts?
It does, yeah. I mean, it's really just demonstrating and showing what you can do. But obviously, nothing beats networking, getting in front of people, and
Exactly.
and geeking out. But
Yeah, I mean, that's
for that.
there's always going to be this kind of can you get in front of the right person, right? There's always that little factor of luck, and the best thing to do is put yourself in situations where you could run into those people. I went to GDC every year for the first 20 years. Like I worked every E3 because I was Electronic Arts and everything back in the day. But if I hadn't, I'd be hanging out at E3, right? Go down there for the afternoon because I live in LA, right? Whatever is in your area that you can attend and just kind of start the networking, do it, right? And people you meet that you don't even think are exactly aligned with what you're doing, they talk to other people as well, right? So that's the whole point of networking. I could talk to an audio engineer and they can meet somebody else and he's like, yeah, I was really thinking about how I would lay out a world. And he'll be like, oh, I talked to this guy, William, that was a DM, and he had this whole thing. I went to his website and checked it out, and you should take a look at it, right? So that's how networking works.
Perfect. Yeah. Actually, incidentally, I'll be at MIGS at the end of October, so I'd love to meet anyone up, connect with anyone that's going to that.
Awesome. Sounds good, Basil.
Thank you very much.
Heck yeah. Thank you for the question. I'm going to send you back to the audience. Basil, there is a IGA IRL channel if you want to post in there and try to find friends for anything that you're going to. To sort of expand upon that for anybody, so those who may not be narrative, there are a couple of things that we've seen work here at the Indie Game Academy. Number one is networking, especially right now with where the industry is at. Networking and serendipity is how you find work. Well, it might be frustrating, but the way that you can control that is you go to as many friggin' events as you can, you cold call cool people online, you say hi. They don't necessarily need to be a recruiter, they don't need to be a hiring manager, they can just be some random audio person. You never know who might pull you into something cool in the future. And I think a great tip about networking is actually the tip you already gave us about making games, which is just have fun networking too. It's not, thinking of it as a grind is only going to make you depressed. And instead, if you can enjoy it, have a good time, talk about your cool world that you're so excited about, that's going to help a lot. And the second thing to add to that is, no matter what the heck your profession is, continue to practice it, continue to show it off, and get it in as many places as you possibly can. So do game jams, work with teams, release games. They don't even need to be for money, or they can be for money, even if they make $0. Get your work out there absolutely as much as possible. Continue to practice, study, and grow. And all of those things wind up being sort of a prerequisite to somebody taking that serendipitous chance on you.
The other thing I'll note is your game doesn't have to be perfect, right? Don't try to make a perfect game before you ship it. Especially now day and age where you can update over and over and over or online. It was a lot different when we were burning ROMs or CDs, and once it's out there and you couldn't change it. But nowadays, like, you can change stuff, continuously. So make sure the fun is present, right? You make sure you think the fun is present, put it out there, get the feedback, iterate to success. That's a great saying, iterate to success. It's something that Scopely echoes constantly, right? Don't think it has to be perfect to put it out there. You will find you will be one of those people who are like, I've been working on my novel for 9 years. It's like, yeah, but you probably could have released the first couple of chapters and gotten feedback on it like within the first month, right? So, it helps to get feedback early and get stuff out early.
Yeah, you use some industry jargon there that I'm not sure I understand. A CD, what is that? Just kidding. Awesome. All right, we've got Krethik up on stage for the next question. Krethik, you are currently muted.
You double muted?
See if we can figure that out. Yeah, I often talk. Can't hear you still. I can read your question for you if we can't figure it out. I often talk about iteration as like, my God. Like, that's where everything stems from. Iterate for everything that you possibly can. Right. Let me pull up your question, Krethik, if I can find it here. Oh, we still can't hear you. So sorry. Let's see. I'm having trouble finding it too. Oh, we got you.
It's a little green box up here.
Hello.
There it is.
Yeah.
Only took a
Hi,
hot second.
Williams.
Hello.
Sorry, I have a bit of laptop. I have a problem in my laptop actually.
No problem.
Yeah. William, I have two questions. Generally, when you get into an interview or in a company, like how do you face rejections? And another question is it okay to have a job gap, like for like a year or something like that, like due to other reasons or like you have due to other possibilities you want, like for example, you want to switch your career. And additional question is like how do you come up with a good idea while creating an awesome game? That's my question.
Good ideas are normally little bolts of inspiration that just hit. There's no formula for coming up with a good idea that I'm aware of. Just like there's no formula for making a good game. Like you can, I don't know how many people, including myself, have tried to reverse engineer Clash of Clans or Clash Royale, and they're like, oh, we'll just change the graphics and change these two little things, and it just doesn't work, right? And that's partly because if players are playing Clash Royale, they already found their Clash Royale. They're probably not looking for another one. And the other thing is, innovation is magic in itself, right? I always say the two ways to kind of amplify your chance of success is be the first or be the best, right? So first one out there that makes Pong, tennis back and forth, beep 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 beep. That's the only game in town, so naturally you're going to be successful. And then you make a cool version of it with people running back and forth shooting at each other. That's a new version of it, right? So, and it's just an iteration on Pong as it goes up to the right. So those are two ways. But yeah, there's no formula for like. And I sit down one evening and I drink my chamomile tea or whatever. And I'm like, okay, this is how I don't have that. It's just it strikes me. A funny idea comes to mind. I'll explore it or something like that. The first question: How do you deal with rejection? Try to take something good out of it. Like, why was I rejected? Like, what went wrong there? Normally, if I am rejected for something, I'll ask the person, like, what do you think I could have done better? Like, what was it? What did I say that, or what didn't I say, or what did I say that kind of set the conversation in the wrong direction? Just so I can learn from it. And lots of people will give you that feedback. So some people are a little nervous about it and they don't want to, but it really helps if you get it right.
Okay.
I have.
Sorry, I have another question. But generally, when you see a lot of like AAA games, different genres are there. Nowadays, you need a story to come up with an interesting. You need a story. Like for example, you have Last of Us, you have Wolfenstein, you have Max Payne. Nowadays, like genre-based games has come, but you need story writers for that. But unfortunately, we have story writers in a different department who are not involved in developing games. Can you tell me the reason for it, William?
Story department. Well, I mean, people do what they love, right? So, story writer's going to write stories. It's okay to get a story writer involved, and if you're not a really super creative person yourself, it's probably really good to make some friends that are just like, hey, a great example. The very first game I ever worked on was in 1988. My friend was in his garage and he was just making a game that was on a satellite and an asteroid crashes into it. And they're like, and I want to do this, with the game mechanics. I said, cool, I can build a story around it for you if you'd like. So again, networking, I knew this guy. And so I got together with him. I wrote this storyline, which was very much aliens, like this thing was crawling around the station and taking people over and then eventually killing them after they like passed it on to people. And wrote the little elements like diaries, like I don't feel well today and blah, blah, blah. And this is why. And so it creates the environment, the immersion factor that the player gets involved with. The programmer was just interested in the programming. I want to make the coolest diffuse lighting, or I want to make the coolest. Back then, it was just I want to make the coolest graphics I could, right? Which didn't have a lot of the layers and stuff we have today. But and it was our two personalities that gelled together that made the game successful. Even though it wasn't commercially successful, it was like successful amongst our friend base. So
amazing.
So yeah, networking. Find people. fill the gaps, right? If you're not a storyteller, find a storyteller that's interested in breaking in. There are a lot of storytellers that are interested in breaking into the industry.
Yeah. Awesome.
One last question. Is it okay to have a job gap?
Karthik, I'm going to make sure that we have a chance for someone else to ask a question.
Sure,
Thank you
sure,
so much
sure,
for your
sure, sure.
questions. And we'll do some
Thank you.
connections for you later, so you can reach out to William later. But absolutely, Karthik, thank you for your questions. For one of the reasons that those distinctions are split, that those departments are split, I guess, is exactly what you're talking about. There's just different people who have different skill sets. And at this point, we spend so much time and so much energy on games that we want the people who are absolutely best at what they're doing, on the projects. All right, I'm going to get Captured Raptor to ask possibly the last question of the day. Rick, I may have lied to you about a second question. Captured Raptor, would you like to ask your question?
I'll be brief. Hi, William. Time to roll for initiative. Just kidding. I just want to ask a question from the business side. So when it comes to fun, do you have any ways that you could potentially measure fun from like a KPI perspective? Like what are some things that maybe junior developers or people creating a studio might not be considering as a measurement of success for what fun could be?
Sure. A lot of KPIs focus around retention. Retention is the most important KPI. If the people don't come back, they'll never monetize. So I truly believe retention is great. Now, everybody knows what retention is, right? Like I come back day over day and I play the game. I re-engage with the game. How you can tell your game is fun and people are enjoying it is how much they engage with it and how they engage with it. It all depends on the game you're making. Like if you're making an MMO, then you expect people to be in the world for a very long time. If you're making a tic-tac-toe game, you don't expect people to be in the game very long, right? So you want to have an expectation as to how much time you believe the people should engage with the game. But if people are kind of hanging out and looking for more stuff to do in your game, that's a really good sign. That means that they like the core element of it and they're ready for you to build more on it and iterate with it. So engagement is the one that I look at.
Awesome. Thank you so much, William.
All right, thank you, Capture Raptor. Yeah, retention seems to always be, to me, the one that people talk about when it comes to actual hard KPIs. Fun is really hard to define, though, and it's part of the reason we're even having this episode. So you can also focus on basically user surveys, see how people respond, tell you how much fun they're actually having. You can definitely check out playtests. You can get a little bit more of that anecdotal data. But just retention, and then like basically how people are engaging. So perhaps you've got a prototype with a couple of puzzles. Are they playing every puzzle? Are they, getting stuck on one puzzle? How much are they actually engaging, and what are they getting excited about?
Yeah, adding some form of analytics to the game is pretty important nowadays. Finding out what people are doing. Are they sitting in a menu the whole time? Are they alpha exploring? Are they doing one activity over and over again? That'll at least direct you to how players are playing your game, right? Mm-hmm. And then as you iterate and you make small changes, you see if those behaviors change.
I love it. Awesome. All right, it is almost time for the end of the episode. So before we go, William, we love to assign homework here. So what is something that the audience can do in the next week that'll take them about an hour to practice finding the fun?
Think about a game mechanic that you can build in an hour, right? Like a simple game mechanic like laying 3 cards out and saying, pick the highest one, right? That's engaging. Like it's a challenge. I'm going to make a choice. My choice matters. So think about a game mechanic that you can build quickly and iterate upon. It's something that at Proof of Play we really believe in getting our stuff out in front of people fast. When I have a design doc I could show you that's like a folder that's this thick, and it's got so many details that nobody's ever going to read it. It is much better just to have something like the core of it is really that thick, right? And so if I just built that core and I saw that people engage with it, then I can start expanding on it. So what is the core? Think of something that's a core game mechanic that's engaging to players that you think people would re-engage with consistently, and then you can build on top of that.
I love that. I'm gonna modify it. See if you like this, because I like to make people do it.
Right.
So here's what I think: come up with that simple core mechanic that you can create in under an hour, and then I want you to play test it with at least one person and tell us how you modified it as a result of that iteration. How's that sound?
That's good.
Awesome. All right. So come up with one core mechanic, picking 3 cards and deciding which of them you keep, whatever the heck it might be. Write about it for us. Test it with a single person. Do it on paper. Make it quick, and see what they think. Iterate on it. Change that design, and then tell us about that change. So give us that sort of 3 section. Here's the core mechanic. Here's how I tested it. Here's the change of the results of the test. Write that up on LinkedIn for us and tag the Indie Game Academy as well as William Schmitt. We'll get excited for you and give you some commentary, perhaps. All right, I think that's going to do it. William, before we say goodbye, are there any last words of wisdom you want to give or anything you'd like to plug here at the end of the episode?
Stay positive, be patient, and respect everyone. Like treat others as you want to be treated. It's the golden rule. It's the golden rule for a reason. And do what you love.
I love that. Yeah. This is an industry founded on sweet goodness, on fun, on just enjoying ourselves. So don't forget that. Don't forget that we're all dorks here, no matter who you're talking to. Even if you're talking to the guy who invented reincarnating skeletons, we're all just enjoying ourselves and making games. Love that. Remember the golden rule, everybody. All right, William, thank you so much for being here and answering these questions. To the audience, thank you for sitting in here. To those who asked questions, thank you for your thoughtful questions. And if you're listening, thank you for listening. And as always, we ask that you send this along to just one other person who you think may enjoy, who is somebody else who could enjoy some words of wisdom from William. All right, that's going to do it for this episode. We'll see you next week, Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, right here in the Discord. There's links to join down below. Bye, everybody. Adios.